and welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. As you can probably already tell, we both look an awful lot happier than last week. We've both got a smile trying to break out, and we haven't even started talking about the football yet. It's got to be more of an upbeat podcast. I don't think we could have possibly went further into the depths of sadness, to be honest, last week, Nathan. Obviously, first I will ask how you are, but then we'll talk about last week because it was a slog, wasn't it?
It was a slog last week, and the result and some movement off the pitch this week has turned it all round. But yeah, that first win in the bag, that first win of the season to talk about, which it's taken a month, 6 games, I think, in total in all competitions so far that we've talked through, and we finally got that first win in the bag. So this podcast will hopefully be a much happier one than last week.
Yeah, it certainly will. I mean, we had a conversation, didn't we, at the match on Saturday, and just said, for anyone, I think I said it at the back end of the last podcast, I said, if you have gotten to the end of it and haven't switched us off, and I'll say so myself, and I think you'd agree as well, fair play, and a quick one of them, I'm applauding for anyone that's listening on the audio if you can't hear that, because, yeah, it was the only thing that got me excited was the sign of Rodrigo Muniz, and also I wouldn't say excited, but I sort of perked up when we started talking about the price of pints in the Reading Stadium, just because it was quite funny, the fact you'd been ripped off. But apart from that, I mean, that shouldn't really be a highlight of a podcast, should it? So straight away into the good news. We'll start on a high, we'll end on a high as well, of course. Matt Clark, it was pretty much done at the time of recording last week. But before the game on Saturday, it was confirmed, Nathan, the big baldy through the door. Nice to get that confirmation, and obviously a vital position filled that Chris Wilder's been wanting to do for so long now.
Yeah, it was. And we did touch on it last week, but a deal that cost Middlesbrough £2.25 million for a 3-year deal for Matt Clark with the option of a further year. At 25, I think it's a fantastic move for Boro to get a player that's won Player of the Year at his last 3 clubs, but in 4 of his last 5 seasons also. So fantastic player in through the door, provides us that balance in central defence. So yeah, a very good signing, and probably expected him to come in to the side on Saturday as well, which he did.
Yeah, as you say, it was a really big signing. I think most importantly, I know we did touch on it in the last podcast, but for the value for money, when you think what we were rumoured to be bidding for Jacob Greaves, not only I don't think there's a drop off at all in the quality of either centre back, but it also potentially gives us that extra bit of funding for whether it be a striker or a midfielder now. You know, we could see some movement in this final week. Obviously, we'll get onto that a little bit later. But, I mean, in terms of value for money, I think even fans of other championship clubs sort of sat up and took notice and thought, well, they've done well to get in for that price. So, yeah, it's always nice to have a deal like that, I'll be honest. So, obviously, Baldini confirmed. In fact, no, Maldini. I think calling them, trying to fit Bald into Ronaldinho is a bit far. It may not be in the long run, but at the moment, we haven't seen him at his peak, so we'll stick with Baldini. Through the door, obviously, delighted with that. On to Swansea now, Nathan. Changes to the team, obviously, from that dismal defeat against Reading. I think it was to be expected, really. There was no way Chris Wilder was going to go with the same team. And he didn't. Of course, some of the changes enforced, some of the changes just through a change of personnel tactics, if you want to call it that. One of those enforced changes, Zach Steffen dropped out the team later. Obviously, we found out that was through a jarred knee in training. So Liam Roberts come in and replaced him. Duncan Watmore also come into the team and replaced Marcus Force. Obviously, Big Crooksy back in the team. I know last week or last podcast you spoke about the importance of getting him back in the midfield. And of course, as I've already mentioned, Baldini was through the door and straight into the team. In terms of all those changes, Nathan, I guess obviously the real shock was the goalkeeper situation, but relatively happy with that team news when it come out.
Yeah, I was happy with it, if I'm honest. Of course, the goalkeeping issue was enforced. So Roberts is the second choice. So he was always going to come in should Stefan be injured. It was only a shock because we hadn't heard of Stefan's injury. McNair being dropped into that right-sided centre-half role. It'll be interesting to see if there's any changes in that position over the next few weeks. We did touch on that a lot in the last podcast and wondered who would be in that role should everyone be fit. And it looks like Paddy McNair at this moment in time. Darrell Lenihan in central defence as well in the centre. And then Matt Clark, the left-sided centre-half, coming in to play with that number 5 on his back. So solid in there. And then it was expected that Matt Crooks had come back in. Was quite pleased with that, if I'm honest. He seemed bright at Reading once coming off the bench, just looking to get us up the pitch a little bit more than we were in that first half last weekend. And then changes up front as well. Yeah. Force out and Watmore in. Perhaps it could have gone off last week where Watmore scored 1.5 at Stoke and Wilder took him out the side and replaced him with Force, and Force didn't do a lot. So yeah, Duncan wouldn't necessarily be too surprised with that, if I'm honest. I think what you always get with him is 100% effort and pressing. And we talked last week about Swansea being confident in possession and the centre halves stepping out from the back with the ball. And if they're placed under some pressure, they do make mistakes. And Watmore's perfect for putting pressure on defenders. So yeah, wasn't too shocked with that move to play Watmore, but pleased with the side overall.
Yeah, I echo all of that, to be honest. I think the only other one that people probably might have liked to have seen is obviously Rodrigo in there to start with. I know that I was kind of hoping for it, but kind of really placing a bit of my sensible hat on, thought it's probably, not the best idea to chuck someone in straight away, because I mean, he hasn't played an awful lot of football over the past, I guess you could say 18 months, to be honest. So, that may have risked an injury. I think bring him on later on. Given that I think we expected the game to be close when he was introduced, which of course it ended up being, that was always going to give us a lift regardless of the scoreline when he was going to be substituted on. So from team news, obviously we've discussed that, into the action, Nathan, and really the game as soon as it started, early phases of play sort of took the path that we expected it to take. A lot of possession for Swansea. If you've watched enough and you know enough about Championship football, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be the team that dominates possession, and they were, as you say, their defenders are all capable with the ball at the feet, happy to take it in tight areas, happy to sort of try and break the lines and play through the midfield. In fairness, Nathan Wood, who obviously we spoke about in that Swansea backline, and we'll get on to his second half performance, but I thought in the first half, he actually distributed the ball quite well. One of the, key things that we were sort of made aware of as to why he is and was so highly rated in the England setup and at Middlesbrough. But yeah, they had an awful lot of possession, but to be expected, really, Nathan.
Yeah, it was. It's always really the case with Swansea, where you'll look at the stats at half-time and at the end of the game, and they probably have 60% possession. They'll have a lot of the ball. It's just whether they can do much with it. And in that first half, they didn't create a whole lot, if at all, anything. The only real half chance that I remember was Obafemi hitting a P roller at Roberts, which it was a good position for him to get a good effort off, but that wasn't the case. Swansea not offering a lot despite the firepower that they've got up front. You look at Perot and Obafemi and you think two of the top forwards in the division really on their days. And yeah, we kept them quite quiet, kept our shape well. And I think really the game plan from us was let Swansea have the ball, but when we do turn over possession, we need to break quickly with numbers flying forward and options either side. And yeah, that's how we got our first goal.
Yeah, we did. And obviously, as you say, you know, Swansea are very well known for having a lot of possession. But they're also sort of known for, you know, if they are put under pressure high up the pitch, it's just sort of that situation where pressure from the forwards and, you know, in that area of the pitch forces mistakes really, and that sort of is where the first goal comes from. The young wing back, whose name escapes me. I know he was very, very young.
Congreve.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nathan. Expert insight there from you. Thank you very much. Gives the ball away, loose pass, tries to play it across the back line without really getting his head up. Crooks anticipates it, if I can get my words out. And straight away, great run from Riley McGree, obviously playing off Duncan Watmore in that number 10 position, makes a great run in behind the Swansea defence, and actually takes a great first touch and fires, obviously, with his weaker right foot into the bottom corner. Really, really good finish, composed. And that was 1-0. And I don't think against the run of play would probably be the fair expression to use. But certainly it come at a time where Swansea, had the majority of the ball. So just to get that goal and really sort of shock Swansea into action was really needed, and it come at a really good time for Middlesbrough.
Yeah, it did. I felt it was quite quiet in the opening sort of 15 minutes, and Swansea just enjoying a lot of the ball as per usual. And yeah, that's what, as I say, we waited Swansea out, and a poor pass from Congreve is latched onto by Crooks, and we move very quickly from there on in. Crooks just drives forward, plays McGree in one touch to set himself with a great first touch, as you say, takes it away from Cabango and Nathan Wood as well, and he just slots it in the corner with his right foot, his weaker foot. It was a good finish as well, and yeah, that's what we want to see from Riley McGree, driving forward, making forward runs. And yeah, it was a good finish as well to get us 1-0 up. And hopefully from then on, we wanted to sort of grow into the game, create some more chances. And we did do that when we had possession of the ball. So quite quickly afterwards, we did double our lead as well.
Yeah, we did. Just quickly before we move on to the second goal, I think I've seen a stat to do with this, and it really made me think. Riley McGree only scores against Welsh clubs.
He does, yeah. Now I think of it, yeah, he does.
I'm pretty sure he opened his Middlesbrough account against Swansea, I want to say. And he scored against Cardiff, I believe, as well.
At home he did, yeah, with a deflection.
So he clearly just loves playing Welsh clubs. I don't know if that can sort of be arranged every week, but a bit of a weird one there. He clearly just loves playing against Cardiff and Swansea. Also, actually, just completely going off track. So obviously you know where I sit in the Riverside. The seat next to me, no one's got a season ticket there, so someone new was sitting there pretty much every game. So I always look forward to whichever character sat next to me, and the woman sat next to me in this particular game. Never seen her before, never met her before. Noticed in the first half she was talking to her husband and had a slight accent, and I was thinking, well, that's definitely not from round here. So anyway, Riley McGree scores. Turns out she was from Adelaide, on holiday from Australia. I don't know why you would leave beautiful Australia to come on holiday in Middlesbrough. I mean, fair play. But gets talking to me. At first, I thought, is this Riley McGree's mum that I'm talking to? It wasn't, just to clarify. But yeah, got talking to her. Basically said that she normally puts, because of the Australia connection, she puts a bet on Riley McGree, first scorer every game. What was the game that she didn't place a bet Riley McGree first scorer for? So, yeah, a really unnecessary story from me there. But I just thought it's not very often you sat with an Australian next to you at the match. So I thought I'd share that.
Very interesting story. I did actually think it was going to be Riley McGree's mum there.
Yeah, I built it to sound like that, didn't I? It was a bit of a letdown there, actually. I mean, it might have been. Maybe she was just lying and didn't sort of want me to, make a big deal out of it. But yeah, anyway, moving on. As you say, doubled the lead relatively quickly after going into the lead. And it's that left-hand side. And I think I'm going to fall in love with that left-hand side. That channel is just made for beautiful football now. Obviously, Matt Clark into the team finds himself quite high up the pitch as what you'd expect from, obviously, Chris Wilder's overlapping centre-backs. Didn't overlap too much, but does manage to get himself high up the pitch. Slips the left-footed wonder kid in behind, of course, Ryan Giles. He whips it across the face of goal, and the big tree is there to double the lead. And actually, a bit of a strange finish, because the way he slides in, I'm not really sure how he's managed to angle the ball into the far corner, but somehow he does it. And Boro have a 2-0 lead. And actually, at that point, I was just thinking, I could get used to this. I've completely forgotten what it feels like to go into a 2-0 lead and just feel really comfortable. And for that moment, it was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was nice, wasn't it? Good move down that left-hand side. It's changing, isn't it? The tide. Last year, it was always down the right-hand side. And this year, it always seems to be down the left. Although we've had a few down the right, but it seems to be predominantly down the left so far. Clark flying up the line, way away from that back three where he probably should be, but Chris Wilder loves his overlapping centre halves. And yeah, he picks up the ball, fantastic ball down the line to Giles, who makes a good run, and he cuts it back. And yeah, Crooks does well to get ahead of his man and flick it into that far post. I didn't really know if it was going to go in from where we were sat either. I thought it was possibly trickling around the post, but I was glad to see it kiss off the post and go into that far corner. So 2-0 up, cruising. It felt good on Saturday. To be in the Riverside with the sun shining, end of August, bank holiday weekend. I had a nice stroll to the ground by myself through Middlesbrough Town Centre, and I thought, right, I'm just confident today. And just going back to before the game, and man, your conversation, you just killed any sort of optimism that I had before the game. I was right up for it, and I went and had a conversation with Chris pre-game, and you are the most pessimistic man I think I've ever met.
Yeah, I do feel, well, I do and I don't feel guilty for that because, it does enable you to, if, it does go bad, then you think, well, sort of glass half full type of thing. Glass half empty even. It doesn't get you too upset. And then obviously when we do win, it allows you to feel even better. So I think, it just depends what type of person you are. But I think the podcast in general, after recording it last week, just really made me feel like, oh my God, we need 3 points as soon as possible. As you say, I was just, before the game, I was thinking the worst. I think my prediction in the stadium before the game was, and I mean, this is really the pessimist of pessimists. Kyle Norton, because obviously I made the connection once on loan at Middlesbrough to open the scoring, and Nathan Wood that had a second. I mean, obviously it didn't happen, but I really did bring you back down to earth with any sort of optimism you'd built up walking to the ground in the sunshine in Teesside. So yeah, I do apologise for that, but you've got to admit it did make the 3 points feel even sweeter, I'll be honest.
It did, and it felt sweet as well to go 2-0 up within half an hour and me to turn around and look at you and just think, oh, we're actually doing all right here at the minute. And then, we got through to half time, plain sailing as well, didn't we really? Swansea didn't create a whole lot. I think there was a dip in effort from Joel Perrault that went past the post that was, again, a half chance towards the end of that first half, but nothing really that threatened Liam Roberts in that first half. And getting at half time, 2-0 up, cruising. I think we were just looking for more of the same in the second half, Chris.
Yeah, I think you're right. As you say, Swansea, just as expected, really. Everything that we said in the preview, everything, as I said earlier, what you expect from Swansea is what they gave, to be honest. A lot of possession and not really anything much else. So moving into the second half now, obviously, we get to the 55-minute mark, and I think everyone thought that Duncan Watmore actually pulled up. I don't think he did pull up in the end. But he is replaced by Rodrigo Muniz, who obviously I was just absolutely ecstatic to see in real life form, to be honest. I've spent so many nights trying to find images of him on Google Images for tweets and what have you, and cutting together videos and all sorts just to see him in the flesh. That would have made my Saturday, to be honest. So he comes on the pitch, and I mean, only minutes really, I think it was after. Ball comes in from the right after a good move. I think it's Crooks, I want to say, who delivers it. Rodders, who was obviously Rodrigo Muniz, Chris Wilder's nicknamed him Rodders, fires one full volley, and before it's even anywhere near the net, I'm thinking, I don't even know how to react if this goes in. I said, didn't I, in the last podcast, that he's really, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm just on the bandwagon so much. I don't know if it's the Brazilian factor. I don't know if it's the number 9 or just the transfer saga, but I'm willing him so much. So when he comes on and hits a volley that is inches away from smashing into the back of the net, at that point, my heart was just out my chest. I was a mess, to be honest with you. But what a strike, actually. And it would have been some goal, Nathan, if it had gone in.
It would have been, and in fairness to him, I thought that he was second favourite for the ball as well. I thought that it was the defender was going to win it every single day of the week. And as you say, Rodders flicks his leg round the defender and flicks a volley onto the post. And I was almost in shock. I thought, how's he even won that? And made a chance out of that there. And he tried his heart out all day, didn't he, when he came on, running all over the place. pressing the Swansea back three and just making a nuisance of himself. Like throw-ins were coming onto the pitch from the left-hand flank, and Rodgers is there catching the ball on his chest. At one point, catches the ball on his chest, flicks it inside, and tries a shot, a volley.
You brought it up.
Tries the volley from all of 45, 50 yards.
Probably 50 yards.
I mean, that'd have been like something special.
If that had gone in, I think I would have had a full back piece recreating the goal on my back, and I'm talking about a permanent tattoo of just the angle of the pitch when he hits it from 50 yards out. I don't think I would have ever recovered from that moment if he'd honestly produced that. And it just shows how much confidence he has. And already I've fallen into the trap, Nathan. He's played all of 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
40 minutes in a Middlesbrough shirt, and I've already fell in love with him. He could do nothing for the rest of his loan spell, but as I said, I'm willing to die on the Rodrigo hill now. So, some people may become quite annoyed if he doesn't score, but I'll always defend him.
Doesn't even look like you're ashamed either.
Oh, I'm not ashamed at all, Nathan. I'm fully, of course, not on the Rodrigo train, because there is only one train in town, and that is the Tuba train, which has obviously come to a quick halt because of some technical difficulties, aka injuries, but that will be departing again very soon, hopefully. And there's nothing to say that you can't be on the Tuba train and on the Rodrigo bandwagon as well at the same time.
At the same time, on both.
Yeah.
Oh, well, at the minute, I think the Tuba train departed for the Riverside, and it was all going really, really well. But there's been some issues on the tracks, and we've had to get that rail replacement bus, and we are on the Rodrigo bandwagon for the time being.
I want to know which player is the real replacement bus. I'm guessing it's just a striker that we don't really want at the moment. But in fairness, there's not really anyone that we can, really crucify like that at the moment. Just on strikers, actually, I know we're really going off on a tangent because we still haven't finished talking about Swansea yet. But big M&M, bags of brace on Friday night. Obviously, he's going to be a development player by the looks of things for the moment, but nice to see Slim Shady getting himself on the score sheet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he played 2 23s games in a week, one at Nottingham Forest, and I think he set one up at Forest as well. And then his 2 goals on Friday night against Stoke, I want to say, at Bishop Auckland. So, yeah, Slim Shady is on fire in the 23s at the minute. And do you know what? I wasn't too unimpressed with his performance at Reading last week when he came off the bench. I thought he did look to make a nuisance of himself, had a few good touches, although he wasn't. It was hard to be involved in any sort of play that we were putting together on last Saturday. Yeah. But we'll quickly skip over that because we don't want to put a dampener on a Boro win by talking about a loss from last week. So yeah, happy for Hoppy at this moment in time, and yeah, hopefully we'll see him in and around the first team sometime soon as well. But it won't do his confidence any harm, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So after that small tangent from just falling in love with loan players all the way to Mr. Hoppy getting his brace, we will revert back to the Swansea game now. Obviously, at the point that Rodgers hits the post, actually it felt like we're going to go on and get a third here and really, put the game to bed. But actually the next goal in the game comes from the Swansea point of view. And I've got to say, of course, it comes in from the corner. Swansea make the first initial contact, and the referee puts his whistle to his mouth, points to the spot. And from my view in the stadium, I had absolutely no idea why he'd given a penalty.
Same as me. I mean, for those that don't know, me and Chris sit in the same block in the West Stand, and when watching the corner come in, I thought it must have been for a push or a pull of the shirt or something, not for handball, but yeah, on further inspection from myself and watching the replays of the camera angles, it does strike Darragh Lenihan's arm. I'm not entirely sure what he's meant to do about it because it is down by his side, but
It's harsh, isn't it?
yeah, it is harsh. But Swansea have a penalty, and with 10, 15 minutes to go in the game, it was squeaky bum time, I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah, obviously, Joel Perot, I don't think I ever had any doubt that he was going to miss from the spot. Obviously, he tucks it away, and from that point onwards, you start looking at your fingernails and thinking, well, you're going to be gone by the end of this game. Because although, in fairness, they didn't create an awful lot, there just seemed to be large spells where Swansea, trying to find an equaliser, would have the ball on the edge of our 18-yard box and managed to have their own little game of possession, on the edge of the box, but then not really create anything from it. And actually, that's where another talking point from the game sort of comes from. They managed to keep the ball well on the edge of the box. We eventually then clear the ball. Isaiah Jones is there first to it. Is brought down and then picks the ball up and decides to start his own sort of, I guess, own version of FIFA Street in the middle of the Riverside pitch. Just a little bit of ball juggling, wasting a bit of time, showing off his skill. It's a bit of a hop whilst he's doing kick-ups, which is, it's really impressive in fairness. So, fair play for Isaiah for just showing us what he's about in that sense. The home side enjoyed it. Ben Cabango certainly didn't enjoy it. He shoves Isaiah Jones. And then it's fair to say Chris Wilder's Mafia rolling. Johnny House in front of the queue, storms over. Then Darragh's ran about 30 yards. He wants a piece. Alex Mowatt's in the mix. And then obviously, to my absolute starry eyes, Rodders is in there throwing his weight about. And we posted the clip on Twitter, didn't we? And everyone just spoke about, sometimes, yes, it's all well and good having a team full of individuals who are very talented, and obviously we do have that. But also when you have that togetherness, I don't think anything, can really beat that, to be honest, because you've got to have both. And although people may say, oh, well, it's not important, I think it is. And I took arguably as much pleasure from 4 of them. And we must also say 2 of which are lone players storming over and defending the teammate.
I love it. I absolutely love it. That video where Jonesy gets shoved and they're all just in there. Darragh's sprint, that's outrageous.
You know what I love the most about it? Darragh Lenihan starts the furthest away out, apart from Liam Roberts, is the furthest person away on the pitch. Obviously, you can't see it from the angle if you want to see the video and you haven't already. Boropolis Twitter, go and check that out. But from obviously just remembering where it sort of kicked off in the game, apart from Roberts, he's the furthest Middlesbrough player away from that. As soon as Cabango puts his hands on Jones, Darragh started his run already and he's over, backing up Johnny Howson. And I really do. It shouldn't give me as much satisfaction as what it did. In fact, you know what I said? That gave me more pleasure than, and didn't even finish my sentence earlier because I just wanted to talk about it. What I meant was that gave me more pleasure than Johnny Howson's Janino-esque skill in the centre of the park second half, which obviously we can talk about as well. But the little mafia that we sort of sent over to deal with Ben Cabango, I'm massively behind that. I want to see more of it.
I'm all for it. I really am. It all goes back to the other week playing Sheffield United at home, and they're quite a not a nasty side, just streetwise, and they'll give you digs, and they're quite physical with you. And I don't like to see Middlesbrough being walked over. And clever from Jones, he's just taking the piss, isn't he? Wasting time, running the clock down, just settling the nerves in the stadium a little bit that were unnecessary in fairness. But yeah, stupid from Cabango, who's already on a yellow card and goes over and pushes Jones. But those players, that a lot of them are the more senior players, Johnny Howson, Darrell Lenihan, Alex Mort. They've been around the block in the Championship, and they're not going to take shit from anyone really. And they didn't, and I loved it. And to see Rodrigo there as well, do you want to know what? I'm a big fan, because he seems like, although he has pieces of flair and just good touches and all sorts to his game, he seems like a nasty piece of work, and I love that. I'm a massive fan of it, where later on in the game as well, giving Ryan Manning a jab in the face, don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. And then when Manning tries to make a scene and then go up to Rodrigo and put his arm in his face, Rodrigo's like, I didn't even do anything.
Yeah,
I love it. I'm a massive fan of it. And if Boro want to be more streetwise and more nasty, horrible, time waste, make everyone hate us, and we start bullying teams a little bit more, of being physical with sides, then I love that.
And to be honest, Nathan, as much as we both love it, I think, having heard from Chris Wilder now, since he took over and what type of football he likes. Yes, of course, he likes his teams to play football, but those little parts of the game, them small wins, which, just stay in opponents' heads and really just add to the, what Chris Wilder wants to build. I think he'll love that just as much as what probably the fans do. Okay, yes, don't be stupid, don't get yourself sent off. But, use your head, be horrible on the pitch, make it as, difficult as possible to play against us. So as you say, yeah, it was a moment, obviously, which results in Cabango's red card. But I loved that. I absolutely did.
The only disappointment for me was not to see Baldini steaming in there. I'd have loved that.
Yeah, do you know what, Baldini, obviously, he sort of has that hard man look about him, but after hearing his interview, I think he's just a really nice man, to be honest. He sounds like a lovely bloke. Who knows, he might have that nasty streak in him, we haven't seen it yet. But actually, he's got the sort of tough guy look, but I just think he seems very nice.
Gentle giant, Baldini.
Yeah, that could be a shout, to be honest. Obviously, we're not going to spend the rest of the podcast just talking about that sort of scuffle. We seem to have analysed that more than anything else. But I think that's, I think it's deserved, in all honesty. Just on the game as a whole, it was just a sigh of relief when that full-time whistle goes, wasn't it? Of course, it would have been had we have got that first 3 points of the season earlier on. But with the added pressure of, just getting that first win on the board, and then the ridiculous amount of time added on, finally the whistle blows for full time. And it was just, I think you said to me before the game, and it wasn't a horrible performance at all, but you said, right now, there's nothing more than I would love than a horrible, scrappy, terrible performance that we win 1-0 and it comes from a goal from, I think you said Clark's arse, to be honest. And that would have suited me down to the ground as well. And it wasn't quite that, but it was a well-earned, well-fought, gritty, gutsy performance, and it did deserve the 3 points. And I mean, yeah, as I say, just a huge sigh of relief once we got that out of the way, really.
Yeah, it was. I think the game can be split into a few chunks where in the first half, the game plan was sit in, let Swansea play out from the back, keep possession, do what they do. But we know that they're going to make mistakes. And when they do make mistakes, we need to turn over possession quickly and throw men forward in numbers and just take our chances that we get. And we did that, got ourselves 2 to the good in the first half. In the second half, sat a little bit deeper, just kept possession quite well when we had the opportunity to do so, looked to create a few chances of our own, but just limit Swansea, and we did that. Unfortunate not to get a clean sheet, in fairness. I think that the penalty was a bit harsh, but yeah, a 2-1 win, the first win of the season, just to get over the line, get those first 3 points, get that duck off the players' back of being one of the only teams left in the Championship without a win. And yeah, sets us in good stead for the next few games and the next week especially.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, before we do go on to those upcoming games, I guess game for this podcast, because obviously due to the nature of the Sunderland game and the date of which as well, I think it sort of means we'll probably do obviously the preview for Watford. That's a given, but we may, of course, we also have the transfer deadline day, so we sort of still haven't made our minds up as to whether we're going to do a separate podcast on that or not. But obviously, we'll let you know in due course. So before we do get on to the Watford game, a few listener questions to discuss. Obviously, it's nice to hear from listeners after the games, and if you do want to send in questions in the future, we always tweet out pretty much on full time, asking for questions, and these questions come following, of course, the win over Swansea. So first question comes in from David Robinson, and he asked, first match me and my lad have missed this season because of holiday. Hope you're having a lovely holiday, David. But his question was, should we just stay away? And to be honest, I mean, I don't think he'd be massively against staying on holiday. And if it's going to mean 3 points every time he misses a game, then David, I'm afraid you are going to actually have to stay away, to be honest.
Exactly. We need all the good luck charms that we can get. One that I haven't done in a long while, but which I did do on Saturday, which I was going to keep to myself, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say it. Because of the way that I walked to the ground, I walked under the underpass.
Yeah.
Which is a bit different to what I'd usually do.
Were they selling bucket hats?
There were near Cineworld. I didn't get one.
Oh wow, we were asking people for that last week, and I still hadn't had any confirmation. But now I know that they're there.
They are there.
Okay. Anyway, continue, Nathan. Sorry.
Yeah. So walk through the underpass, which is a different route to what I'd usually go. And it meant that I walked past the Ayrsham gates on my way to the ground. And when I do have the opportunity to walk past the gates, I always go through them and give it a little touch on the way through. And I did do so on Saturday, and first win of the season in the bag. So perhaps I need to change my route a little bit more upon going to the game, and take a quick detour to go through the Ayrsham gates.
Yeah, perhaps. And obviously, David, to answer your question, I mean, I don't know how long you're away for, but if your holiday continues to Tuesday and we win again and you're still on holiday, then I think that answers your question, to be honest.
And you better stay away for the following Monday as well.
Yeah, if you are thinking of booking a short trip away, then make sure you just do it for the Sunderland game, because that would be lovely if that trend continues. The rest of the questions, in fairness, all very much sort of the same type of topic, really. And it was to do with Matt Clark. I mean, we've obviously touched on him already and his newfound nickname, and obviously the price that we paid for him. But just how impressive was that debut from Baldini?
He was fantastic, wasn't he? Just, I think before the game, I didn't really appreciate how important that balance is, to have a left footer, an actual out and out left sided centre half playing in that position, and to have Matt Clark there, it was fantastic to see. Strong in the tackle when needed to, clever with his passes forward. I think it opens up more passing angles to have a left footer in that position, and we saw for the second goal, fantastic ball down that left hand side to Giles that I don't think a right footed player would have been able to execute quite as comfortably. But a sublime performance from Matt Clark, considering he hasn't had much of a pre-season. He didn't look too out of place, did he, at all? I think he said in his post-match interview that we should be expecting a few more overlapping runs once he gets into his flow a little bit more. But what an opening display from Matt Clark. He was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm always very hasty to praise people too much on the debut, because, I mean, Marvin Johnson put on one of the greatest debuts I've ever seen, and I mean, he never quite hit the heights after that. But in fairness to Matt Clark, it was a great opening performance, and he just showed, for me, probably, I don't think you can ever be perfect, but, you know, a real good level of a mix between, if it's not on, if it's gonna put the team at risk, just clip it into the channel. Don't be silly with the ball. Don't risk giving up an easy opportunity. But then when he's confident enough, when the angle's there, play forward, play good passes, keep the ball, retain possession, and try and basically put the other team on the back foot. And I think he was perfect. And as you say, he mentioned it in his post-match interview, once he hits his sort of level of fitness where he's played a couple of games, I'm sure we'll see him getting forward even more and affecting the play higher up the pitch in that wide sort of centre-back role. So, yeah, it's a really positive debut from him, a really exciting signing. And I guess that leads us quite nicely, given the talk of a new signing, to potential other new signings. Of course, this will actually be the final time we talk about transfers before deadline day, won't it? So, I mean, there could be any amount of things and twists and turns which happen between now and at the time of recording, Monday night. Obviously, we're going to try and get this out for Tuesday morning. I mean, there could be so much to happen. Even since the Swansea game, there's been a few little twists and turns and updates. So we start with one that really is, I guess, off the list now. Late last week, Footy Insider linked us with Ethan Ampadu from Chelsea. I think, of course, he would have filled in the role that Johnny Howson plays, deep ally and a bit of a destroyer. But it now looks like he is set to go back to Italy. I think, again, it probably would have been a good signing. I think, you know, he's certainly got pedigree. but obviously we don't want to spend too much time talking about a player that is now, in terms of, it's not confirmed but once Fabrizio Romano says it's happening, it's 99.5% happening. So that's one to cross off the list. Today, Nathan, two bits of transfer news. Norwegian site, I believe. In fact, no, it may have been Danish, actually. Danish. Yes, sorry, I'm getting mixed up with another striker we've been linked with, whose name I will not mention. A Danish outlet reports that there was a bid from an unnamed, and if you're listening to that on audio, I have done the sort of quote marks with my finger when I've said unnamed, English club of £7.5 million. Given the links, Nathan, given the sort of noise surrounding Emile Rees, I think everyone's sort of put two and two together and thinks that this bid is coming from a Middlesbrough direction. Obviously, it's hypothetical because we don't know, it's unnamed, but we've heard ourselves that there's certainly concrete interest there. Is this a move that you'd like to see happen? One, just for the player, but also, given factoring in the fee that's sort of been mentioned today.
It's a move that, had I not listened to Preston fans speak, I'd be very, very pleased about. We saw Emile Rees on the final game of last season run amok at Deepdale against Middlesbrough's back line. I'd say he scored a hat-trick, but it was with a slight deflection off Dale Fry for his first. So we'll say 2.5 goals.
2.5, real again, yeah.
Yeah, so we saw him play really, really well against us on the final day of last season. Of course, scored at the Riverside last season as well, albeit from a fantastic Sol Bamba assist. And I think in previous seasons before this as well, Emile Rees scores against Middlesbrough. So yeah, it's a player that every time I've seen him play against us, he's always in the right place at the right time, scoring goals. And last season was it was his best goal scoring season in England so far. I think he got 16 in the league, which is a good return for a striker at a club like Preston, who struggle in certain games to break teams down, and on the whole are a side that are just a bit. They're not a side that are down there in the bottom of the division, but they're not pushing for that top six either. Usually, so from his build, I think he can definitely cope with the physicality of centre halves in this division. He's relatively quick. We saw him getting behind against us last season in that final game where he did chip Luke Daniels. But I think there's got to be some sort of questions asked about what's going on there with this move, because Preston, it's like a story in the Championship at the moment where we've played how many games in the league now? 5 or 6?
I think it's 5 league games and then
5 league games.
I think.
So we've played 5 league games, and Preston have not conceded a goal yet and only scored 1. And Emile Rees hasn't started many games, has he, for Ryan Lowe's side. For a player that scored 16 goals for them in the league last season and was their top goal scorer, not to be in the starting 11 in the opening month of the season for a side that is evidently struggling to score goals, I think there's something possibly wrong there with either Ryan Lowe and Emil Rees falling out, Ryan Lowe possibly not fancying him, Emil Rees for any possible reason. But for a player to have scored 16 goals for your side in the previous season and to bomb him out on the bench and only bring him on with half an hour to go every week, it does seem strange. But going back to your question, would I take him at Middlesbrough? I would. I think he's 24. At 24, you've got a player there that can improve, has potential to improve, has just come off the back of his best goal scoring season ever, and is coming into a side that it's clear from the stats regarding XG that Middlesbrough create a lot of chances and a lot of good chances for their centre forwards. And if Emil Rees can put those chances away quite comfortably, then £7 million might seem like a snip, especially considering a certain Ashley Fletcher cost £7 million.
Yeah, but I guess that was in a different time for Middlesbrough Football Club. And I mean, really, without being too harsh to Ashley Fletcher, I don't think he's ever been a £7 million footballer in his whole career. So that's a topic for another day. On Rees, yeah, like you said, it's a strange situation. Obviously, Ryan Lowe, probably looking in from the sort of outside, doesn't really see eye to eye with Rees. Clearly doesn't, because otherwise he would be starting, as you say, in a team that is struggling to score goals at the moment. The fee, 7.5 million, even 7 million, if that was the number. I think it feels worse at the fact that he's not playing games at the moment. You know, okay, yes, he had a great goal scoring season last year, but last season's been and gone. If we're looking at buying a player at this current moment, we're talking about spending 7.5 million potentially on a player that is on the bench consistently, or at least starts on the bench consistently for Preston. I don't think if you said, for example, I don't know, a similar team to Preston, let's say who are a similar team to Preston. They're a bit of a sort of lone ranger, aren't they? And that they're just, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, they're not a hugely exciting club. Nathan, who would you compare them to? Because I'm not sort of offend anyone too much here. But
I think if you take away the last few seasons because they've been struggling with financial fair play and been balancing books, probably a Bristol City type club.
Yeah, Bristol City, I think that would be a fair one. If you said, and we didn't know anything about this player, and he hadn't scored 4 against us, but he'd scored, I don't know, 15 in the last season, like Rees had, but then started this season on the bench, hadn't played for however many games, you'd be saying, well, hang on a second, why are we paying 7.5 million for someone that's like pretty much not getting a game? It really is a strange situation. I can't quite put my finger on it. I know Preston fans can't really either as to what is actually going on there. In terms of just, removing sort of the fee in terms of the type of player he is, Preston fans sort of agree that he's a little bit erratic. A lot of them say if he did go or come to Middlesbrough, he could go and score 25. He could not score again all season. And I know, obviously, fans of clubs, and if players want to leave or they aren't in favour, they often are quick to sort of just slag them off and disregard what they're actually good at. But I think that's the last thing we need in terms of when you think really now this striker that's going to come in and that Chris Wilder blatantly wants. I think it's crystal clear now that he wants that marquee striker. I'm not so sure that he fits that mould. And I know that might be a little bit unpopular because of his goals return last season, but I just think of course, any signing for that kind of money is a big risk. But, erratic strikers in a team, yes, that is going to create a lot of chances. But with already Rodrigo Muniz, who's a little bit off the cuff, of course, he works hard and things. We've seen that already. I don't know if we need someone that's going to be not necessarily scoring a goal every game, but just a player with more standout attributes. Whether that be more of a physically built sort of target man almost, or someone that is just going to be purely pacing behind. And I think Reece is sort of, in the middle of that a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's not being confirmed who this reported bid has come from, but I think, it wouldn't shock me at all. It wouldn't shock anyone really if it was from Middlesbrough. So we await an update on that. And also moving on now to a new name, Nathan, actually, who hasn't been linked up until really about an hour before we started recording this. Brentford midfielder Frank Onyecca. Really sort of come out of nowhere because there's been no sort of inkling that we may be interested, or a few clubs have been mentioned. It just sort of popped onto Sky Sports that we were in talks with Brentford about a loan move for Onyeka, of course, a Nigerian international. Brentford paid big money for him. Plays in that midfield role that would obviously be the deeper of the three in our midfield. And in fairness, I think it got quite a lot of people excited because Brentford, of course, the sort of kings of recruitment over the past few years. You sort of go with, well, if Brentford have signed them, then there must be something about them, really, whether that's, the right or wrong way to look at it. But he comes with experience of, as him, he may come with, because, it's not confirmed yet. Experience in the Champions League, experience in the Premier League, albeit he was a little bit sort of hampered with injuries. It would be a solid addition in my eyes, a little bit of an unknown quantity still, but as we say, went to Brentford for a good price, and for a player that's played in the Champions League, I don't really think we're in a position to sort of say no and turn down a player of that calibre, to be honest.
Yeah, there must be a reason that Brentford paid the money for him last season after coming up into the Premier League, and things just haven't sort of gone his way. I don't think, as you say, struggled with injuries at times last season. But from what I've seen of him, he looks like the type of midfielder that's quite combative, strong and physical in the middle of the park. And I've just seen there, scrolling through Twitter there on Craig John's feed, apparently his nickname is Frank the Tank, which...
Sign him up and get it over the line.
I'm all for it. I want a tank in midfield.
Everyone does, Nathan. Everyone does. And as you say, from the signs, from what Brentford fans have said, I think they all sort of agree that this is the move he needs. He was probably expected to be, one of the first names on Brentford's team sheet when they obviously paid such a big fee at the time for him. Obviously, as I say, through injuries and things like that, it probably hasn't, worked out as well as they may have hoped. But if we can be that club where he comes to and really starts to play games and find a bit of a rhythm in English football, then certainly his pedigree can't be questioned, and I think it'd be a good addition. And just to add to that as well, before we move on to previewing the Watford game, in the past week, Chris Wilder did say that for the Reading game, had we have had bodies through the door, it probably would have been a game where Johnny Howson would have sat out of and had a little bit of a rest. I think, Chris Wilder realises now that Johnny Howson, at his age, as much as, we all know how much he runs and how much distance he covers, I think he realises that playing a player of that age, regardless of their fitness levels, 3 times a week is just not sustainable all season. So obviously that would add great depth to that department. So Nathan, to wrap up the podcast, obviously we have a game on Sky midweek, a trip to Watford, of course, newly relegated. They've had a bit of a mixed bag of a start, haven't they? You never really know what to expect with Watford, considering they change their manager every 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it, with Watford? I think going into this season, I was a bit unsure of what they were going to be like. They appointed Rob Edwards, who got Forest Green promoted from League Two into League One as champions last season. Likes to play that 3 at the back with wing backs, but with some star players still at the club, it's helped them out massively, hasn't it? They've got some of the best forward players in the league at this moment in time. That on the first day of the season for them against Sheffield United, they started with a front 3 of Emmanuel Dennis, João Pedro, and Ismail Assar, who, I mean, if anyone was offered that front 3, in the Championship, then they'd snap your hands off, wouldn't they? But Dennis now out the door, gone to Nottingham Forest for £20 million. João Pedro was linked away with him moved to Newcastle. Fabrizio Romano even gave that one the here we go, but it's fell through now. And João Pedro played on Saturday for Watford in their game at home against QPR, as well as Ismail Assar as well, being linked away with a move to Aston Villa for £25 million, and that deal seems to have fallen through as well. So both those players still in and around the Watford side. As I've said, they're 2 phenomenal players. And they've added to that as well Keenan Davis, a player that, had it not been for a loan spell at Nottingham Forest last season, would probably be out in the wilderness somewhere at a random Championship club. But he's now at Watford on loan for the rest of the season, although I don't think he's going to be ready for Tuesday night, which is a bonus. It's always a bonus when one of those big players for the opposition is out. But Watford away, it's a fixture that you'd look at the start of the season and think, well, that's probably going to be one of our most difficult away trips of the season, just because of Watford coming down from the Premier League, retaining a lot of their better players, and to play them so early on in the season as well. Those players are still there. I think the only sort of thing that may do us a favour is, with it being so close to the transfer deadline, with João Pedro and Ismail Assar being linked away, perhaps they may not be in the matchday squad if moves out of Vicarage Road are inevitable. So we'll just have to wait and see, but they're certainly a very decent side for this division with their personnel that they have.
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually, Nathan. Obviously, as you mentioned, because it is so close to the transfer deadline, and actually just going back to the last podcast, I don't want to sort of dampen the mood because it was a bit of a shambles at times, but I'm pretty sure I said the deadline finished on Tuesday, and obviously that was incorrect as well. So I mean, just goes to show where I was getting that information from. Let's just say that the results clouded my judgment, but yeah, we're over that now. And as you say, with it being so close to the deadline, there may not be risk, because if there's potentially, I don't know, £50 million worth of transfer fees that they could recoup, then they're probably not going to risk those 2 players so close to the deadline. So we'll wait and see with that one really as to whether anything sort of develops from their point of view. And just on the style, really, I've seen a few Watford fans sort of complaining that actually they're struggling to sort of find a style, and it's partly down to the fact that sort of those moves for Pedro and Ismail Assar sort of fell through. They went to a front two with two of their new signings, Bale and I think it's Minaj is how you pronounce it. That may be wrong.
Ray Minaj, yeah.
Coming to Watford, strangely enough, on a free from Barcelona, but I've seen a lot of people criticising him, but obviously we're not going to do that because he'll inevitably score. But yeah, they just can't seem to get that style right at the moment. And I think, as I say, a lot of Watford fans are putting it down to the fact that Rob Edwards hasn't really been fully supported. He's a manager that loves to play five at the back, and they've even chopped and changed from that, from a back five to a back four. So clearly they haven't quite found the rhythm just yet, and hopefully we can use that to our advantage and really play them at a time where they haven't found their feet and haven't found their sort of style that they're going to go with for the rest of this championship season. So on that note, Nathan, I think we are wrapped up for this episode. Obviously, we do have Sunderland coming up next Monday, but as we mentioned earlier, I think we'll probably end up doing it a separate video for that. Of course, the deadline is approaching for the transfer window. Final question of the podcast, Nathan, because obviously we won't record anything until that's done. What are your hopes for the final few days?
Similar to Chris Wilder, I think. A few of the numbers that he's thrown about, I think, have changed slightly on how many players he wants in the door. But I think the number's now 3, another 3 players in the door. And it looks like the positions that we're identifying are another forward with the potential for Josh Coburn to go out on loan, although he's injured at this moment in time. I would like to see him go out on loan and sort of get that regular game time, grow into his own body a little bit more, and sort of endure the physical nature of a League One campaign. And then probably some more bodies in midfield. I just think that should we have an injury in there, then it may leave us light. So 1 or 2 more bodies in midfield would do me. So I'd say two bodies in midfield, and we need that main man.
We do, Nathan, and who knows, it may even come in the form of a big Norwegian. I'm not even going to say the rest because I don't want to get anyone's hopes up or my own. From me and Nathan, that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast, and thankfully it's been a lot more upbeat. We've both had way smilier faces. It's been far more enjoyable to record. So for the goodness of our own podcast and just our general mood, Middlesbrough, please get the job done next week and sign some players that we'll all be happy with, and we can do an even more upbeat podcast. Before we go, I should say, please do, if you're listening on audio platforms, leave us a kind review. And if you want, let us know where you're listening from, whether that be on Twitter, if you want to tweet us or anything like that. And of course, on YouTube, do give us a like and subscribe if you do wish. And Nathan, I think that's us done. So from the pair of us, thank you ever so much for watching and listening as usual. We will be back soon, and that's been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast.